Lisa Kathleen Grady is the curator for women's political history here at the Smithsonian. So when you were putting together this latest exhibit, how did you decide how the gowns would be placed and what it would say about the history and the role of these first ladies?
Well, we picked a series of gowns, partly just based on what we thought was pretty and what hadn't been out in a while. Sometimes it's nice to be the curator. You get to just choose things. We also wanted an array of color, an array of different styles. It's not chronological, so we wanted to maximize the space in the case and really maximize the look of each style and the color of each dress against each other to make a more pleasing picture. And I think that putting things that are far apart in time next to each other as opposed to a slow progression, you really see the amazing difference between, say, Lucy Hayes, that dress with the bustle and the very tight shoulders. If you look at those shoulders, you're not going to raise your arms above your waist. And something like Grace Coolidge's flapper dresses. It's an amazing difference. And if these were chronological, they'd be so far apart, you wouldn't really be able to see that.
You said we try to put things out that haven't been out in a while. Does that mean there are gowns? Are there items that are back in storage?
There are some things that are back in storage that will hopefully come out in time. One of the ideas is that we can change things out here. If you're not doing every First Lady, one eases the pressure on the dresses. We're trying to make them survive as long as possible. And some of them have been standing around for 100 years, so they need to rest, they need to be out of light. And this allows us to change things around. It also simply allows some things that haven't been seen before to be seen by new people. We have more in the collection than the gowns that I always think of them as being the type specimen gowns, the one that everyone expects to see for each First Lady, but sometimes we have others, and those are interesting too.
There's a lot of fanfare that goes into the giving of the dress. How did that come about?
That has also been a changing tradition. People always think the exhibit looked one way. It's actually been about 9 different shows. It's been changing. People think that the gown presentation always happened one way, and in reality, it didn't really start until Lady Bird Johnson. The tradition was first they amassed dresses to create the show, so that happened. That sort of just a big bulk the first time. And then they would ask each First Lady and the ones to fill in the blanks for a dress. Now, Helen Taft got interested in the exhibition. She was the First Lady at the time, and she contributed her inaugural gown, her 1909 inaugural gown. So she set sort of the tradition of giving your inaugural gown, and every First Lady since then who has had an inaugural ball has given her inaugural gown.
Has anyone ever refused or balked at the idea?
I don't think anyone has ever refused, but Edith Roosevelt, who we'll see around the corner, and we'll also see her inaugural gown, she didn't have a lot of patience for this. She was not First Lady at the time, but she said that she didn't save clothing, that she cut it up and made other things out of it, and so she did not donate anything to the collection. Her daughter, however, later did. And what she donated was the inaugural gown. But Mrs. Roosevelt wasn't kidding. The bodice had been removed from the dress. And so it now has a prop bodice.
And does that give us some context of the time, that was a traditional, normal thing to do?
I think Mrs. Roosevelt said that she liked to cut them up, and she said satin dresses or silk gowns work very well as tea gowns. And it just may have been a quirk of hers, or a thrifty quirk of hers, that she remade her clothes.
It's not just inaugural gowns, because there are examples of other types of gowns here in this exhibit. So why do we care so much? It seems on every occasion we're looking to see what they're wearing.
I think, one, we've become a very sort of red carpet culture that likes to look at analyze what people are wearing. But there's always been an interest in the First Lady's fashion. People were interested in what Martha Washington was wearing. Again, I think it's because we look to these clothes, we look to this entertaining style for clues. We don't meet the First Lady. Currently, we probably have more exposure to the First Lady than we've ever had, and we still don't know her. Most of us will never meet the First Lady. So we have to figure her out based on these little clues, snippets of interviews, what she's wearing, what she served for dinner, how she entertains, and we piece all that together to get an idea, the causes she promotes, and we piece all that together to create a rounded view, our own view of the First Lady.
And yet they're supposed to represent sort of a presidential style, if you will, if you can explain what you think that means. And then which First Lady didn't meet public expectations when it came to that, and which ones were really praised for their style?
I think the First Lady sets the tone, the style and demeanor and tone of the presidency. She picks the china, she arranges entertainments. She's the one that sets the feeling of the presidency. She's also the more accessible, probably, partner in the presidency. So she has to decide, all those entertainments are going to come down, she will be graded on those. She will be, her choices will be examined. And you've got to take a while to figure out, I can't imagine how daunting it must be to come in and have to face your first state dinner. You've never done this before, what are you going to do? And they then set a tone. If they deviate from that much, it's going to be viewed as they're reassessing. If they follow it, well, that's fine, but did people like it or not like it? And the White House has ebbed and flowed between very elegant and more casual, and as the country's changed, also as styles have changed, with the style of each First Lady. And people have reacted pro and con to each one, starting with Martha Washington, who had to figure out what on earth is the appropriate style for democracy, or republic, if you want to think of it that way. How do you command respect for a new nation, a fledgling nation, but not look like a monarchy? You've got to step away from that. So how do you balance that? What's casual, what's formal, what's informal? But yet she was addressed as Lady Washington because no one knew what to call her.
So who was criticized? Who really hit it out of the park and met expectations?
I think the Dolly Madison is sort of the first amazing social First Lady. Was the go-to touchstone for years of a successful First Lady. She had decorum, but there was a little bit of casual and informal and fun to her events. If you had a card of introduction, you could come to Mrs. Madison's weekly crushes, her receptions. People mixed and talked. It was said that you couldn't tell who her friends or enemies were because she was lovely to everyone. And a lot of business got done at Mrs. Madison's White House. Some First Ladies have been less successful, sometimes because they were awkward in the job, and sometimes because their taste didn't jive with public taste at the moment. And some of them have done amazing reversals. Nancy Reagan came in determined to make a much more formal, what she thought more appropriate White House. She got some pushback for the increase in formality, but as that went on, people began to admire what the Reagans were doing in terms of the tone of their White House.
So does the criticism, the praise sort of reflect the politics of the time, the culture at the time, maybe the public polling of the president at the time?
I think it reflects popular culture at the time where we all are as a culture in entertaining. We do expect a higher standard of the White House, though. We know it's not our house, and we know that it is a more formal style, but it can't seem too formal. It can't seem too ostentatious. I think ostentatious is the more correct word. It can be formal. It can't be ostentatious. So it can't be showy.
Given that, I mean, which dress in here do you think sort of reflects the times, like Eleanor Roosevelt's dress, for example, or another dress that comes to mind, maybe? I mean, which really reflects the times?
I think they're all pretty representative of their time period. I think Eleanor Roosevelt's is a beautiful, simple dress that really reflects that period of time. She's walking a line because the first inaugural ball. It's during the Depression. She has to look elegant and appropriate, but again, she doesn't want to look too rich. She doesn't want to look too ostentatious, and that's a elegant but simple dress. Anyone could wear, you can visualize yourself in that dress and an event to which you might be able to wear it, and I think most people could look at the pictures of her and see that this was something that they could relate to. Jacqueline Kennedy's, this is the dress from her first state dinner, this beautiful yellow Cassini dress. That Jacqueline Kennedy is more shaping fashions. Mamie Eisenhower, the amazing magenta dress, back here, very 50s, an amazing silhouette, but that really speaks to the formality of the new look and the 50s. And when you look at something like the flapper dresses, or actually Nancy Reagan's wonderful suit, it's an Adolfo suit, and you look at that and you know it's the 1980s.
Right, seems very 80s. Yeah.
Yes. They want to be appropriate for the occasion, appropriate for their age, appropriate for the circumstance, and I think appropriate as a symbol of the United States, because we still do look at the First Lady as representing women in the United States. Even when she's not functioning in duty hours, she represents the United States.
Excuse me, we will have 2 photo opportunities. The first is for the still photographers, and then that will be followed by the television cameras. So we ask our guests to please be patient.